Welcome to No Compromises, a peek into the mind of two old web devs who have seen some things. This is Joel.
And this is Aaron.
Today's topic is brought to you by the fact that Aaron made fun of me recently because I was suggesting use of a JSON field in a particular feature, and he's like, Joel, why is everything JSON fields with you? And so he had a point, that there were a couple circumstances in a row. It's not a feature we reach for a lot, but and a few different things I was pitching it. And so, anyways, it sparked this conversation idea like, what is a good use for a JSON field? And what are some things where maybe you're like starting to stretch or like squeeze a round peg in a square hole or vice versa? Like, just to kind of talk through it. And mainly so Aaron and I can hash this out and not have this argument in the future.
Well, so we can prove that Aaron is right about this argument. So, yeah.
Yep, no. Exactly.
So I think there is a bunch of context about this particular discussion, and we'll get to that a little bit. But the main question we're really talking about is, how do we store more than one piece of specific information in a column of a database? And should we? In Eloquent, and so that's when we talk about these JSON fields. Is like, hey, we have a column, or we have a property. We want to have a list or the shape of data or something here. Now, does that fit in here in that column, or is that some sort of relational data that we should have normalized out like we have with other things? I think that's really the question.
Yeah, that's a good starting point, because like, well, what's the alternative? And like you were saying, probably the most common alternative is like just create a table with columns in it and those rows and use foreign keys and like relate data that way. If we go backwards in time, I think maybe like the older version of the JSON field would be like serializing PHP objects or something. And that's not even on the table right now because for myriad reasons. Like, we had to do that recently. Using Saloon, it was one of the recommended ways of storing an OAuth authenticator, and like we didn't like, this feels wrong. Like, we shouldn't be doing this anymore. But yeah, the JSON field is a nicer version of that, and databases actually support it, right? So if you need to query it or filter it or whatever, or update a piece of it in place, like there are mechanisms to do that.
Yeah. So I think one of the issues is, what is this data that we're trying to store, and like, how are we using it? Is it queryable? Like you said, it can be query, but there's different types of. So our tools that we're developing queries on support the JSON query language, for example. There's all these different things that we have to consider with that data. So let's give an example of a piece of data and where that might go.
Yeah, and I'll kind of come up with a sanitized version of a real life thing here. But let's say you have a set of configuration options that are like in the database. You have different companies, right? And so each company might want to customize, this feature is turned on or off, and it's just to make it more concrete, let's say there's at least 10 configuration options. And I think this is valid too. The vast majority of companies are probably not going to want to customize it, at least not in the short term. So does that help set it up? Like, do you want me to describe the shape of the option, or is that good enough?
No, that's good enough. So basically, we have a number of different options. So that number, first of all, is the first calculation I would do.
Yeah,
is like, how many things are we supposed to track here, and how do they get updated and things like that. So if it's maybe a one-off, maybe one setting that's a little bit different, or two, then I'm starting to think like, okay, and it's a one-off for this one client. Maybe we can store it, in that data structure. But when we start talking about 10, that's when it starts getting to like a different level with me. It's like, well, if there's 10 of something, there's a greater chance now that there's 10 that those things are going to be modified.
Yep.
Right. So a single thing has X% of modification. Once you add so many onto there's a chance it's going to get modified more frequently. And so that's kind of what I will do. I'll use my next measurement on saying is like, hey, how many are the thing in here? And then what is the frequency of that change and stuff like that?
So which way is that pointing you, though? That like the more you have, the more prone to change. Does that make you more double down on it should be a table, or more double down it, well, it should be a JSON object because that'll flex as the changes come?
That's a good question. I think I know what you said, like the flex is the data as the changes come, but
Yeah.
that's not the point.
Okay.
I'm guessing here that I'm basing this off of we have a reasonable certainty of the shape of this data for time to come, not forever,
Right.
but
Right.
we know. So there's not a lot of change in regard to like the shape. So I don't have to worry about modifying tables and doing really
Yeah.
complex
Okay.
key value things. But I'm looking at the fact that we have one property that now has the logical decisions of 10 things on it. And
True.
that's where I'm starting to get to an issue is when I'm starting to store data and I'm starting to store more than just a ton of different decisions on that
Yeah.
one property. That's when I start to think like maybe that's not the right way to have this data.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's maybe a relevant bit of context for this particular feature that I didn't include. And there was some inherent logic like, oh, if they don't customize it, like if this field is null, this configuration
Hmm.
field, then it should fall back to the current system defaults, which those are going to be captured in like in code in an enum somewhere. And so that was part of the decision. Is like, well, we need to already have an object that kind of encapsulates this logic. So, if we have an object in the database, if it's there, we pull it out, we kind of merge it in with the defaults. And that was the other thing too, is like maybe this one company would only customize one or two things and like the other eight would fall through to system defaults. So this is a much more nuanced thing now that I'm saying it,
Yeah,
but
it
in
really is.
general terms, I agree with you there.
Well, yeah, it's this example too, because I was thinking about like these are both key and values that mean something in this
Right.
example. So
Yeah.
if they change the key, I mean, that's an it. Like, do you edit everything that has been using that key or whatever? So
Right.
again, that's that's a different question. Like, so
Yeah.
is the shape of the data or of the key and value going to change? If so, then we definitely not going to use this JSON column like this.
Right. Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah. It would make migrations a lot more complicated to have to like reach in and start reshaping JSON objects throughout the database. So, this was helpful. Like, I want to maybe throw out another example
Hmm.
where you clearly talked me out of using the JSON object, and it was for a different reason, and it was just for simplicity. So, in this particular case, I'm trying to remember the feature now, but it was we had a situation where like they could change the labels of something. It was actually kind of similar to this, where there's a system set of default labels for a field and one company actually said, well, hey, could we change this to that? And I didn't want to create like a whole CRUD interface and a whole extra table. And
Hmm.
you're like, Joel, we have this. This is such a simple feature. Just make it a CRUD feature. What was your thinking there? Was it purely about the size of the data, or was it also, I think there was another layer on there of like just making it the same as other features in the app?
Well, yeah, that was that. Again, we're kind of going into the context of
Yeah,
this particular thing. So I think we kind of we started generic, and now we're going really onto a specific
that's
problem.
right. Let's go.
Um, but it was because we had a very similar setup,
Hmm.
and only a few of the requirements were slightly different. So, in like an example like this, we already had a system where there was a relationship and a set of data is created when it was first instantiated, and
Yeah.
then those are CRUD. And so the ability to kind of copy that over, and it solved a lot of the problems that we thought, basically what happens if you edit it or things like that.
Right. Yeah.
So copying this over, we already had that functionality. And I think it also allows us to have a discussion with a client and say, like, hey, I understand that you've said this one thing. Here's a different way that we could do it. And we think that this is better. A
Hmm.
couple of reasons. A, the real reason. B, we're also doing it in your app with this other setting. Do you think we should do that? And a lot of times you'll find that even like if you're looking at a requirement or you're looking at something you're trying to build and it's very technical and you have to even ask yourself, is this actually a requirement? Or did the client not understand the complexity of this?
Yeah.
And that we need to step that back too. So I know I've kind of like a tangent here,
Ooh.
but there's a lot of different things involved with are we going to use a JSON structure or not for this?
Right. Well, yeah, the one you were just that little bit of a tangent, like I think that could be a whole separate episode because it's like, how much do we trust these requirements? Like, are they actually the real requirements, or is this like this is what they promised right now and what they need right this minute? But we know in like a month or two, it's going to expand, and then we should have just done the full feature like the other one that already exists. Like you're trying to predict the future a little bit, but you're also playing the odds based on our experience of how this has gone on other projects.
Right. So I think overall, in general, when we consider these, again, we went on a tangent, but when we consider this JSON column, I think it really has a lot to do with like how core is this to the rest of your application? How many are there? Like, what is the impact of this property
Mm-hmm.
on how the application runs? And
Yeah.
maybe that's the kind of thing is like if the impact is anything, I don't, it's not even a measurement, but like anything reasonably large amount of functionality changes with these properties, maybe it's something that should be more inside of a tighter structure
Right.
than just a JSON, object. And by the way, so we don't get anyone just super angry, there are tools for JSON objects, for storing that. There's no SQL databases and stuff. We're not talking about that specifically
Oh,
for this.
right,
This is
right.
we're talking about like MySQL or Postgres or something like that.
Yeah. No,
There's
that's a good
there's a whole
JSON
other
field column type.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, there's a whole other database type.
That's right. Yeah, and no, that's good summary. It is a little bit of a gut feel. And there's probably other metrics. Like obviously there are performance impacts, right? If this is something going to be heavily queried and you need an index on it, and again, depending on your database engine and what version it is and what features are enabled, like those are all things that are outside the scope of this discussion. But I kind of like your high level algorithm based approach for like, does it make sense as a JSON field or not? Last weekend, took a little bit of a road trip, and as I do driving, I was having some deep thoughts, Aaron. Not really, but more just random thoughts, trying to keep myself occupied. Uh, the first one I want to share with you is I don't know how noisy your car is, but like you're driving on the interstate and you're going fast enough. There's a little bit of road noise in your car. I mean, maybe
Mhm.
your car's fancier than mine, but there's a little bit of road noise. And we were trying to listen. For some reason, we had queued up the soundtrack to Interstellar. Are you familiar with this movie or
Mhm.
soundtrack?
Yeah, yeah.
Symphonic. But like the
Yeah.
thing is, long sections, super quiet, then long sections, super loud. And so like when it would get to the quiet parts, you literally I couldn't hear anything at all. So you'd crank it up, and then boom, like the pipe organ would come in. So I guess that was my first thought is like, when you're doing a road trip, like, do you have a bias to certain types of music to listen to? I know you're a music guy, so like, would you
Yeah,
ever
yeah.
listen to the Interstellar soundtrack? Was that just a fool's errand?
That was silly, man. That's
Yeah.
that's something that you listen to at home when you're not gonna crash the car.
No, it makes driving seem way more intense. Like, oh, I'm landing the spaceship.
Yeah. No, I mean, I I listen to usually rock or rap, basically anything that will exercise the subwoofers in the car because I'm a
Ooh,
toddler and have those.
I should.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, I like it when I drive past and it sounds like there's rattling in the trunk and paper back there because it's going.
All right, I got one more driving question for you. I'm just going to throw this at you. Also relates to like being on the interstate. Are you a cruise control guy? Do you like
Yeah,
to kind of
yeah,
pick your
absolutely.
Okay, so and like I think your car maybe like adaptive cruise control. So like if you're cruise and then you come
Oh,
up
I
on
don't, I
somebody.
don't trust that, dude. I'm a programmer.
Oh no.
Like I've seen how we program our stuff, man. I'm not gonna trust my life to this car.
I'm not going to sleep, but like if there's something like 5 car lengths ahead and it like starts to slow down, like that's a useful feature.
Hmm. Sometimes you have a question, like we started out this podcast, and it goes on a totally different tangent, and you learn a bunch of new things.
Sounds a lot like what goes on in our Mastering Laravel community. If you want to check that out, head to masteringlaravel.io and click the community menu.